Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of SubQuery Sessions, and today I'm very lucky to be joined by Octopus Network. They've been making a lot of news recently, and today Sheldon, a technical lead at Octopus Network, is joining me on our episode. Hey Sheldon, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, James.
Awesome. Let's start with the first question. Introduce yourself, and then maybe tell us a little bit about Octopus Network.
Sure. So I'm an IT security engineer who's very proud to have just left the Fortune 500. I was part-time with Octopus for a short period of time, but I'm very proud that Octopus Network is my first full-time gig.
That must have been a
So,
bit of a transition, right, from a Fortune 500 big corporate to a small, scrappy startup.
oh, sure, but I've been active in crypto for the past, let's say, somewhere between 4 and 7 years. So I'm not unfamiliar. I'm not intimidated. I knew what I was getting into, let's say, right?
Awesome.
So, a little bit about me. I have that sort of, traditional IT security background. I've gone through more of the, let's say typical IRs of troubleshooting, which is, firewall switches, routers, proxies, you know, more boring stuff. But in getting to do that, I worked a lot with application owners, and that meant, hey, can you do a packet capture and then look at the Java in this request and help me figure out what's going on with my application, even if the sort of ACK-back doesn't make it to me, right? So I have a lot of relevant experience from Fortune 500 time, but again, not the subject. Working at Octopus Network, I'm very happy that I can take a wide range of talents and make them useful. I've got a lot of experience in sort of technical business development, technical project management, just things that are halfway on the business side. It's kind of an uncommon skill set to be, actually pretty sharp on the business side while staying sharp on the technical side. So yeah, that means that I cover technical support for Octopus. Sometimes I act as a technical representative. I like helping with partnerships because I love finding interesting organizations and just talking to them about what they're working on and, telling them how either our solution can help them or how our support can be worthwhile. And I'm also starting to build up the grant program, which is not formally sort of, in prod yet, but it's a work in progress. And we'll be looking forward to growing the ecosystem with some, very interesting projects like our own wallet and NFT tools later this year.
So Octopus Network has got a lot of interest around, and I keep hearing it coming up. And so please, for those that don't know about Octopus and haven't heard about it, can you explain what you're trying to, what's the aim, what's the goal, and how you're going about that?
Absolutely. So Octopus Network is a new substrate ecosystem designed to help people launch who have made good ideas that are sustainable. There's lots of substrate chains out there that want to be NFT marketplaces and that have these sort of like capital dependent operations. We respect them. We think that they can become viable business models, but they don't strike us as the sort of Web3 that we'd like to see, right? So just as Vitalik and others have mentioned it, there needs to be more non-DeFi, non-capital incentive type of things. The purpose of the Internet of Money was never to be a money of monies, right? It's not really why we're here. So our main motivation is to help raise up substrate projects that are doing good work, making sure they have a good place to live, giving them resources that we can afford to give away to make sure that they have a chance to mature and either reach the kind of maturity that means starting a Polkadot auction, slot auction, or just going off and becoming your own ecosystem. My favorite sort of tip of the hat projects are Saito for running an independent sort of game arcade where I can, get a substrate wallet auto-generated for me. I don't have to go manually attach or go to Poke.js or anything like that. That's a great freestanding substrate-based ecosystem of software. And also Math Wallet, tip of the hat to those guys. I really like what they're doing. They've built an incredible product. And it's unfortunate they've had to basically run on a production test net for an extended period of time. We see this model that Polkadot has built, which is beautiful to have these, incredible flagship, top of the line products using Substrate. And we support that. We think that's great. But we also want to see space for the little guy to grow and rise up. And that's effectively what we've become.
So you're trying to become a nice foundational technology incubator of sorts. So providing a great like layer of infrastructure so that a new project can kind of get started as soon as possible, right?
Yes, and we've been very careful with the word incubator because it's confusing. In this posture, we can't accept equity. You know, we sort of can't take on the generosity that some app chains might want to give us. The whole thing is very much a trust exercise. So Web3 Accelerator doesn't quite have that same ring to it, but you're dead on. This is our purpose, is to sort of support, incubate, you know, provide more than the average resources to get good projects going.
And the way that you're doing this is quite interesting, right? So you're supporting Substrate and you're supporting projects with, you know, like as you gave an example where if they want to go for a Polkadot parachain down the road, you kind of give them that foundation infrastructure that would make it easy to migrate to. But you're also based on Near. So how does this work?
So we effectively have our fingers in 4 different ecosystems. Our token was initially minted on Ethereum and then bridged over to Near Protocol. Near Protocol is where our pseudo lives. That's where we actually control and orchestrate a series of smart contracts that support our infrastructure and that support AppChain infrastructure. Additionally, we built the first IBC library for Substrate. So we're going to be getting our fingers into the Cosmos ecosystem a little bit more in the future. But right now we're helping build that bridge between Astar and a counterparty on the Cosmos side. So because we work with technologies in these 4 ecosystems, we're spread there. You know, we have interests all across there, but our main focus is sort of being the app chain solution on Near, which means that it doesn't make sense for us to convert regular Rust smart contracts running on Near into these Substrate chains. We need to welcome projects from everywhere who want their own chain to build on Substrate in a sustainable way. And right now the market is mostly EVM projects, you know, I don't want to say fleeing, but sort of looking to find their next solution. If that's not something, you know, like the EVM app chains already provided by other parties, then transparently it's us. I usually go through this sort of solution discussion with people. Hey, what do I want to do with my app chain design? If you are looking at integrating a significant volume of transactions, activities, you know, integrations that are off chain, Substrate is inherently better built. You know, EVM only, it's not that you can't run it when you run your own chain, it's that the ball and chain, if you'll forgive the pun, is significantly larger when you're trying to work in an EVM only solution and then reach out to HTTP clients. Maybe you have distributed MongoDB or you're running Hadoop or something somewhere. You know, if you have secondary or external components, we're trying to be the app chain solution that supports you. And we're doing a decent job of that. But right now that mostly means integrating pre-built Substrate tools. And in the future, we hope to be building our own and incentivizing our own as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you expect there's going to be more integrations with other chains outside of, you know, Near, Polkadot, Cosmos, and I think what's the 4th one that you mentioned?
Well, Polkadot Eco, we do have a plan to build a sort of Substrate to Substrate bridge. Because the SS58 address standard is so template and straightforward, there's no reason we can't sort of use that to show that old Substrate can be bridged to new Substrate, as long as you're comfortable, you know, sort of not requiring, you know, complex NFT metadata, anchoring to newer things in WASM, you know, just relatively straightforward. If you're looking at comparability across the 2 products, they're quite similar. So to answer your question, there's development happening for IBC with an Ethereum-like client, with a Hyperledger-like client, a couple of other smaller projects sort of attempting to link up. That's our main interest. We genuinely believe that IBC is the starting point that will help these conversations get easier. You know, custom bridges that are not based on a third-party validator set, that are not based on third-party liquidity. We really believe that's the solution to solving this sort of cultural misunderstanding around the Internet of Money. There's not really a need for, you know, someone to say, hey, Polkadot's the best, no, Polygon's the best. Like, no, they're both good structures and they both have significant use cases, some of which overlap, some of which don't. So, you know, we're really motivated to help other parties do some development that we can't do. Simultaneously, we're doing development in the background that we're a little bit hush about, and that includes the sort of Ethereum IBC hookup. There's Another party that's worth mentioning in that operation, and that's DataChain. DataChain is working on, I believe, both a Hyperledger and an Ethereum light client. So we're really vested in making sure that tools like that, become useful, because that base level of interaction. Oh, hey, I can exchange fungible tokens across ecosystems. You know, it's a really different cultural device. It's a really different driver for developing applications, for developing partnerships. It takes away the silos that are currently segmenting liquidity all around crypto, right? So that's what we really believe, is that between now and 2024, we have to make a big push to integrate these ecosystems together better. And we don't think that's done by becoming a middleman for those ecosystems.
Yeah.
It's done by creating protocols and relationships.
So doing what you're doing, and for those that don't know, like you're trying to propose where teams can build their own app chains with their own application specific logic and their own blockchain that obviously connects to the Octopus network. It does look and smell quite a lot like what Polkadot is doing or trying to do with Polkadot parachains. Having been able to see what's happened with parachains over the past year, what do you propose differently? What have you learned from that you've kind of taken into your design of Octopus?
Well, I think the most key differentiator is that, well, I guess this is like a two-part. We don't have a slot auction state, the sort of economic race condition that is a slot auction. At the very peak of the substrate market, this makes perfect sense. But at the ground floor, where people should just be, trying to get their MVP into production, trying to refine their work and make it functional and worthwhile, this level of competition doesn't really make sense. So we don't have a auction structure. We have a sort of veto-oriented voting structure. The result is whoever sort of net has the most votes goes first. If you lose an election, you can still run next election and then start booting up and starting your app chain shortly after. So that's sort of the number one differentiator, is that we do not have slot auctions. But probably a more weighty differentiator is that we are not an inflationary economy. So Dot and Cosmos have sort of set this as an economic model for scaling purposes. And I think it's completely viable to say, like, okay, we want to encourage emissions, but at the same time, we're expecting the ecosystem to expand. Near also has a model of sort of burning and minting to create an elastic economy. I think this is reasonable. It makes a lot of sense, but it's not the way that we want to operate. So there are only 100 million OCT tokens in existence. We won't mint anymore. They'll all be liquid and on the market as of August 2024. Our economic differentiator, besides the lack of slot auction and the vote, is that the sort of cost difference between launching with us and Polkadot, yes, of course, it's going to squeeze a little bit tighter, because the price of our token will go up when there's more people using it, as there's already 4 chains running today. The logic of a non-deflationary, non-inflationary token that's just static supply means that there will have to be more interactions between the people who need to use that token. What does that mean? When you come into the ecosystem, you've got estimated a minimum 3-year life cycle. This is something that we're pushing through audit, basically saying, hey, the math of your validator set, the amount that you're going to pay out to your validators each week, that has to make sense over the course of a minimum 3 years, right? So that means once that time expires, you either have to go through a token generation event where your value prop is modified, or you have to leave the ecosystem. We encourage you to market, dump on us, because we don't mind the sell pressure. It gives other people who are interested a chance to buy. And that means that the sort of token squeeze that we're walking up to is a very communal relationship to say, okay, AppChain X is going to leave the ecosystem in a couple of months. We should start talking to them. Maybe they don't want to market dump. We can, sort of arrange a price with them, call it an OTC deal. And then, we can take up their sort of minimum validator set of tokens. That will be enough for our app chain to start. So that means at max capacity, we technically don't have a limit of chains that we can host by technology, but based on token allocation, it was, twice as small recently. We've just reduced the sort of minimum validator requirement in escrow from 10,000 OCT to 5,000. knowing that we have a total 100 million token allocation, I think that means that there's a maximum of 2,000 app chains. I might be counting the zeros wrong, forgive me, but that's only based on economics. If we truly reached maximum capacity, where there was a let's say a stalemate, lack of OCT liquidity, too many projects want to join, not enough leaving, then we would sort of throw up a DAO vote and say, hey, do you want to reduce this by a series of decimals? Do you want to drop a couple of zeros off the structure? So
But hitting 2,000 app chains building simultaneously on Octopus Network was you probably tick the box of your kind of goal at that point, right?
Yes, that's true. But on the other hand, the only reason we're able to do that is because our integrations with those chains are so lightweight. When I tell people about our solution, they're like, wait a minute, it's not, chained to Doomslug, the near protocol consensus. Nope, those app chains that we support, they're completely sovereign. They can do whatever they want. We support them by acting as a validator of last resort and giving away some other infrastructure, but there is not a way that we can control them. We can ask them to update their versions of Substrate, but we can't make them do it.
So tell me about how you're using SubQuery in your solution right now. Like, I know that you guys have been working for quite a long time on it, and working away in the background, and you've been building some pretty cool tools. How are you using SubQuery in your solution right now?
So right now it's still looking moderately simple and straightforward, because we don't have a good data standard to share across the ecosystem and say, hey, if you have sort of auxiliary extrinsics, if you have operations that are let's say application specific or non-standard, there's not a great way to show that in the Explorer today. But that's because we're not customizing things for each app chain. We need this sort of template that is viable for each one, because, like I was saying, our model to scale up is incredibly simple. It's just a lack of extra communication and hardware where it's not necessary. That's roughly the thesis we took to our SubQuery implementation, because while SubQuery is the critical explorer that we give away to all app chains, giving something like an explorer away to all app chains is a serious lift. And doing that, let's say anywhere close to 100, forget 2,000, it gets expensive quite quickly. So the indexing of that data is obviously the more costly of the two, but simultaneously running an explorer as a as a web tool, that has its own sort of scalability limits. So what we're doing to make sure that we sort of show off the value of SubQuery, which is extremely efficient, is by just leaning on that efficiency. And that means not going into detail, not getting application specific values, not giving the app chains the probably best explorer that they would want to have, but giving them one that's viable and that makes it easy to get started. When other app chains ask me about this and say, well, can't I have this custom thing, or app chain candidates or potentials, I say, well, no, because it's not just a cost to manage it. It's not just, an operating cost to manage it. It's an operation that we would have to take on, and then we'd have to be willing to sort of set up some exception to do that for others, et cetera. So you can imagine what this is, the equivalent of being the kindergarten teacher and saying, nope, there's only enough cookies for one person each. That's kind of what we're doing, to remain fair and scalable.
It's a tough time, when you're building a product for a lot of different teams, to avoid as much as possible becoming a project, which I imagine that you guys at Octopus have to go through a lot. But you're using SubQuery right now to power your on-chain explorer, and you're using it in a few different networks that you have. Are you also thinking about giving it away to those app chains and saying, look, if you want to have your customization, you want to have all the fun you want to do, and you can dress this up and paint this up however you want, here's the core SubQuery project and you can adapt it? Is that an approach you're taking?
That's also one, yes. We haven't seen anyone plop down their own Explorer and index or pair just yet, but we do expect it in the future that there would be a pretty reasonable cause to say, hey, it's worthwhile to run this. So one of the reasons why we do run it for other chains is because it's incredibly hard to manage that as a cost. As an ecosystem, you're trying to figure out how to make the chain sort of fund itself. We're working on the Web3 economy components. There's all these other components of, keeping liquidity active and, not necessarily assigning market makers, but just making sure that you have some market activity outside of your chain itself. Because the chains that we're raising up, they're not financial products. They're, genuine products and the equivalent of small businesses that have a need for some liquidity, that have the need for some market activity. So I think it's highly likely that Myriad will be the first to bring this about, because Myriad has been, building out at a very fast pace. They've got a lot of support from different ecosystems. I think right now you can integrate them with either their native SS58 wallet or a regular Polkadot wallet or a Kusama wallet. And that means that you're just using that public key as your identity to go start using the platform. That one of the capabilities on that platform is building your own social media network that includes token payments of your choice, whether it be your token, Myriad, or a third-party token. So that's a lot of data to be maintaining and a lot of data to sort of structure out over time, especially if someone builds a secondary social media network on your chain, which already hosted a social media network. You probably need the ability to do a little more than just, hey, I see a transaction was completed, somebody moved some tokens. You probably want to know when someone creates a social media network and then know the details associated, right? So
No
that's
point
kind of the
having a
project I
social media
expect
network
first.
if you don't know what's going on, if you don't know what people are doing, if you can't engage with that, right? So it's kind of critically important.
Yes, and because they are using our sort of, free service to start, this is the one they're most familiar with. It's the one we're encouraging them to use. SubQuery is relatively straightforward. Like I said, I come from IT security and network engineering. If I can pick up the basics, then I'm pretty sure that top-notch developers or even just, slightly experienced developers can too.
No, that's a good point. So like what you're going through at Octopus is quite similar to what we're going through at SubQuery, and I'm curious to know from your point of view is what makes a great developer ecosystem? How do you build an ecosystem where developers can jump in and start doing stuff? Let's say top-notch coders can jump in and start building their own app chain or their own SubQuery project with minimal hand-holding by yourself.
So I think that's really a two-pronged thing, and I'll just be straight out that this is a result of hanging out with the Near guys and being a part of the Near ecosystem effectively, is that UX is great and UX brings users, whoop-de-doo. It does not bring developers. So balancing that sort of development experience and UX, I think that's really what makes the difference. Near Protocol has this great problem to have, which is effectively too much documentation. I think there's something like 8 websites that have token standards and contract guides and lots of things to build that are not Near University or that are not specifically learning platforms. They're KBs. So I think that's a big component of it on the builder side, is to say, hey, we want to give you a relatively easy building experience, which means if you understand basics about this language, whether it's Java, Rust, or something else, WASM, I don't care. If you want to do good development and quickly, then there has to be motivation to do that, which means that users will be able to connect to it relatively easily, something like a common React front end, and then documents on the development side to make things make sense. So I apologize if I went a little bit of a tailspin there, but that's genuinely what I believe, is that UX and sort of developer enablement are the most important things we could do.
Yeah, no, it's very true, but also what you're doing as well as your grants program that you're about to set up, right? So we've gone through setting up a grants program with SubQuery, and wow, it's been a lot more work than we thought, but it's also been quite rewarding seeing grantees progress through and in some cases graduate and seeing their idea going from inception to reality very quickly. What are you looking at when you're setting up your grants program? Who's your ideal applicant for this program?
So if you want to build something with us and that thing is not an app chain, then you're probably in a better position than most to figure out an economic model to exist with us long term, right? When you run an app chain, you're designing your own economy. You need to make changes, or you sort of have these presuppositions that work in your benefit. That's kind of the opposite of what you deal with when you're running something like an indexer, an explorer, or building a third-party tool, or raising up an external website that benefits Octopus. It's hard to manage the cost for these things. And when I say hard, I mean hard in the context of Web3. If you're saying, hey, I've got a bag of venture capital and I could do this because we're expecting X amount of, increased foot traffic or dollars or whatever, sure, that's very doable. That's really not our model. We don't exist in a place where profit is a regular thing. We don't have a profit schema. So to suggest that someone could come build with us, for a cost below 100K and then, over time rake in more than that in some capacity, it's just not the way that our ecosystem is designed. So in a nutshell, I think that's the best way to describe it is if you want to build something cool for Octopus Network or with Octopus Network sort of, integrating us, then that's probably the best fit that there is, knowing that you're not going to get a direct capital return. You'll get other types of returns. We're very quick to plug in our top business partners with other parties. We're very quick to sort of, be a technical champion of people who we work with, SubQuery included. And we have a pretty strong motivation to make it worthwhile to work with us. Our whole ecosystem is effectively a trust operations. We're showing that we can give away value and be useful to others in order to build trust so that our solution is worthwhile, and that so as we transition to a DAO structure, that won't seem like this, kind of just, throw it at the wall attempt to not be responsible for stuff.
Yeah, I definitely agree that I think it's very important that a lot of grant programs you see around are all about just money. Like apply now, get some funding, good luck. And that helps. Certainly it pays the bills, puts food on the table, but you can save a lot of time and a lot of effort and make a better product with better connections and better partnerships and all these other things that, like building this going back to your product management background, right? But it doesn't matter if you build the most amazing product. It's about right time, right place, right time, right partners, right sales channels, right ecosystem. Like all these other factors can completely veto the perfect product. So it's good to hear that you're thinking more around that encompassing that warm blanket of all other benefits that aren't monetary.
We do know our market share pretty well, and I'm very proud that as a security guy who is also kind of like dipping his toes into some compliance, that we'll probably avoid a lot of pitfalls that other grant organizations go through. Part of that's because we have Near Foundation really supporting us in a big way. That's not me talking down to your grant program. It's just I feel your pain on it being more complex than it really should be. But that's just the nature of moving money in this kind of way and using it in a genuinely altruistic manner instead of a sort of seemingly philanthropic manner as some things do.
Yeah, definitely right. Last question, Sheldon, and I always ask this is, what bit of advice would you like to give someone that potentially is still at a Fortune 500 company, thinking about dipping their toes, but also looking at the market, thinking maybe that time's passed, I missed out on that. What's your advice on someone, maybe yourself, 2 or 3 years ago, before you got into blockchain?
Well, I think the mindset of the best time to plant a tree was 25 years ago is a pretty reasonable feeling, but the second best time is now. So that's pretty much my ethos around this is that, hey, if you have an interest, you don't have to necessarily dig a hole, seed it, water it, tend to it, but at least start looking at what it means to dig that hole. Start understanding what it means to plant a tree. I've been walking around with this sort of paperless business card that gives people a link to a document that I like to share very much because it's a series of quick ramp ups for Rust and Substrate. I think that a lot of people will stumble on these things because they want them, but I'm trying to detangle away a little bit from, the idea that you have to be so motivated that you break through SEO, that you charge through a volume of educational materials to figure out if they're useful or not. It's a little frustrating. So I've been trying to make that easier. But coming back to your question, the real thing to do is to, in my opinion, play around with Rust. I think Rust is the real answer to Web3 that we've been looking for. JavaScript is nice. JS is very useful for front ends. But I don't think, JS as a basis should be what our longstanding eco is sort of made of. And I don't think that means that JS isn't useful. I think that the average person in IT today who's thinking about moving, they've had JavaScript in front of them before in some capacity, right? Odds are, if you're in a technical role, even if it's networking only, you were probably asked to deploy a Python script that had to be conscious of JavaScript objects. So that's my advice to anyone who's considering getting the space. Number one, start playing with stuff to get an understanding of what it might be like to sort of put both feet in. And then number two, ask somebody, find somebody who's got a similar career path, find someone who's got similar characteristics than you. You'll see this in some cases where they're telling folks, hey, if you're trying to network or hack, then use LinkedIn and see other people who've gone through your companies, look through your past companies, right? If you're going that route, I think it's incredibly productive to do a little bit of your own research, ask a few questions, tinker, and then reach someone like me or someone who's been in the space for a few years and say, hey, what can you tell me about actually getting into this?
No, sounds good. Hey, thank you very much, Sheldon, for your time, and it was a pleasure talking to you. And if anyone else wants to read more about Octopus Network, the website's here, and I hope to have you back sooner than later, really, to hear more around how Octopus Network's growing, about the app chains that you're incubating or accelerating, incubating the bad word, and seeing how things are going. But thank you very much, Sheldon, for joining today.
Thanks so much, James. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.